As I said, we are going to be going through year-end processing. Primarily, I will be talking about general ledger year-end processing, but I will also touch base on year-end processing for payables and receivables. So I will start by going through what you need to do before you actually run the year-end procedure. And then within GP, some of the checks you need to carry out in order to make sure your year-end runs smoothly. Then I'll be going through the actual year-end process itself and then what to do afterwards. Okay, so just going into GP. So before you start running your year-end, excuse me, you should first always run your year-end in a test company. The reason for this being is it allows you to identify any issues that could potentially come about as part of year-end without having to run through the process in your live company. It will also give you an idea as to how long the live year-end will take. So the first thing you should always do is speak to your IT department to make sure they take a backup of the live database that you want to do year-end in and restore it into your test company. If you don't have a test company, then please feel free to get in touch with your account manager and we can actually help you create a test company for those purposes. Okay, so assuming you have got a test company, I will take you through the steps that you need to follow to carry out year-end. So the first thing you should always do is set your year-end back to the last day of the financial year you are closing. I'm going to be closing 2014, so I'm going to put my date back to 31st December 2014. Once I've done that, the next thing I need to make sure is that I have got the next year set up. So by going into my administration pane and going to company, I've got my financial periods. So within here I've got 2014. See, I've got 2015 and 2016. What I'd like to do is actually set up 2017 just to be 100% sure. So just type in the date. See, I've got my start date and end date, and then simply calculate. All my financial periods are available. Always a good idea to close them and just make sure the first period is open. First step done. Next stage is you need to make sure that you have got your retained earnings account set up. Without this, when you run year end, nothing will actually post it to your reserves, profit, loss, depending on what kind of organisation you are. So going into my financial, within my general ledger, I need to make sure I have got my retained earnings set up. So just going to find my retained earnings account. If I don't have one, very, very simple to set up. And it's key to make sure you get the correct posting type. So with that set up, what I can also do is within your chart of accounts, if you have multiple cost centers or segments which identify separate divisions, what you can actually do is any profit, loss, surplus or deficit that appears within specific cost centers, you can actually get them to close to not just a single retained earnings account, but a divisional retained earnings account. So what you can simply do is identify which cost center or subsegment you want to close out to, and what that will automatically do is create retained profit, surplus, deficit to a cost center balance sheet as opposed to a single. I'm going to leave it as one. One thing that's key is allow posting to history. Now what that will enable you to do is post year-end adjustments once the year-end is closed. Posting to history can be done back to a single historical year. And what will that will actually do is update your opening balances should any postings be done. All done. So once I've set those up, the next thing I need to make sure is that I run check links on the system. And check links is a way of just re-indexing the information to make sure that everything adds up correctly. 2 and 2 make 4, you don't have any ghost records. It's always best to do this after a backup to make sure you don't accidentally lose any information. So to run check links, once again, it's under your administration. Actually, I'll go in through this way, it's a bit easier. So tools, maintenance, check links. And you should run it on all series with the exception of system. I'm going to do it on financial. And you'll know when it's finished. It gives you a total record there. I'm going to click OK. And what I always do is I print a record to file. So I'm going to pop this on my desktop and call it GL Checklinks 2014 year end. So my system's going to go away and make sure everything's okay. And once it's completed, it will give me a report which tells me of anything that's been fixed. See, it's relatively quick. There we go. And it's just updated my chart of accounts. Another key thing to do is to reconcile your balances, to make sure that your summary figures and your detail figures match up. Now, this should really be part of your regular month-end routines, but I'll show you how it works anyway. So I'm going to do it on Financials, and it can be found under the Utilities tab, and you see you've got Reconcile. Simply, I'm going to reconcile 2014, and that's now done. So far, very straightforward. One of the key things you need to make sure of when you run year end is that you have got your chart of accounts set up correctly. If you don't, then when you run year end, obviously your P&L will be moved to your retained earnings / profit / loss or surplus and deficit, and your balance sheet will retain an opening balance. So this is where it's good to structure your chart of accounts in a nice simple way to make sure that your ranges are not set up incorrectly. A good tip on this is to actually create a smart list favorite. So all my balance sheet codes begin with 000. So I'm going to go into my financial and list off my chart of accounts. Within here, you see I've got my account number and my posting type. So realistically, to make sure that I set up my chart of accounts correctly, I want to see if any codes that have started with 000 are not balance sheet. So I'm going to go into my search, and I'm going to search for my segment 1, which is cost center, is equal to 000, but where my posting type is P&L. No problem at all. So we've actually got some expenses in here. They're obviously company-wide expenses, but you'll see they all start with 4 and upwards. So I can add another search in where I can say my nominal is less than 4,000. Perfect. All my balance sheet's correct. So what I can actually do is I'm going to save this as incorrect balance. And to keep on top of this over the year, what you can actually do is you can actually set yourself a reminder. So if anyone does set up a code incorrectly, it will pop open and tell you. So I'm just going to say, any of my incorrect balance sheets, if the total number of records is greater than 0. So when I log in the morning, it will actually pop open and tell me. From the same principle, I'm just going to change that and just make sure all my P&L are set up correctly. With this one, it's slightly different. I'm going to take my nominal out. So here I have a range of codes which are incorrect. So to ensure these are actually correct moving forward, you can either do them individually or use Integration Manager or any other integration tool to correct them. All you simply do is go into each one and save. So once you've done your checks, the last thing you should do before running year end is take another backup. So once your IT department have taken your backup, and again, if you don't know how to do this and you need a hand doing it, please feel free to get in touch with the account manager and we can by all means help you. So once you've ensured that your financial periods are set up, or your chart of accounts is set up correctly, and you've posted any unposted batches, the last thing you need to do before you run year end is print off your summary trial balance. The reason for this being is once you've printed it out, once you run year end, you can then mark off balance sheet opening balances to make sure that they match the ending balances with the exception of the retained earnings. It's a good idea to save one of these, so I'm just going to go Reports Financial Trial Balance, and I'm going to create a new one called Year End. You'll see it's automatically defaulted to 2014. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do where my segment ID is 000, and my nominal is up to 3, my last 3. I'm going to do mine to the screen, but you would realistically probably want to do it to printer so you can actually print it out. And I'm going to save that. So what I can now do is I can print that. So there we have all my balance sheet codes with the ending balance. So the last thing to do is to run year end, and it's critical that you always take a backup, whether you're in test or live, when you do your year end, so you can easily go back to what it was before. So I'm going to go into my routines, got my year end closing. So there's my retained earnings, and that's the year that's going to close. So in processing close year, it will give me a message, say I've got some unposted transactions. I can click continue. You now get a nice progress bar to say what it's up to. And you get a year-end closing report, which again, you should keep. If you're using analytical accounting, you will get 2. You will get one for your general ledger year-end and one for analytical accounting year-end. There we go. There's my analytical accounting. And here is my year-end closing report, which I saved the file. You can also email. So now year-end is closed, we can go in and see that within my financial periods, 2014 is now marked as historical. So all I now need to do is go and print my summary trial balance again. For 2015, And in old terms, tick and bash, mark off the opening balance against the closing balance of the previous year. What I always find a good idea is if you've got these printed out as well as the year-end closing report is to staple them together and then it's good for the auditors to see. Now, if you do accidentally close your year-end, there is now the option within GP 2013 upwards to reverse out the year-end. My honest opinion is still carry out your test year-end in a test company. But should you want to reverse out your year-end, you can actually reverse historical years and then just click process. From a subsidiary ledger perspective, it's a lot simpler. And the another reason as to why you set the date back here is that if your purchase ledger and sales ledger year-end close date is 6 months or older than the current date and you run year-end closing, what will happen is the current year-to-date figures, which get transferred to last year, will automatically just get moved straight to life-to-date. So it's just a bit of a tip to make sure that this year, last year, life-to-date figures for sales ledger and purchase ledger are running correctly. Very simple to do from a purchase ledger perspective. Once again, under routines, you have your year-end close. And once again, you get a report, which you should keep. And from this perspective, all it does is it moves current year to last year. So you get a nice, clean start from the beginning of the year to say total year-to-date spend, invoices, payments, so on and so forth. The routine is exactly the same for the sales ledger. And that, in summary, is how to process a year-end close. We do actually have some notes available which we can send you with details on how to do a general ledger year-end close. We have a number of these. If you contact your account manager or the help desk, they will be able to provide these for you with step-by-step instructions on what I've just gone through. Hopefully this has helped everyone. And please feel free to email your account manager or myself for more details.